Alrighty, well, we got just one more little thing to do, Blunty, and that is a rant. I have a rant today. I brought the rant today. And my
Yeah.
rant, you were like, what is there to rant about? About Throttle Expo. Oh, sir. My rant goes back to this video from Chris Rosser. Uh, uh, and he gives some tips about rates and flight feel. And of course, the video is amazing in every way. But I disagree with him because he is telling people that, and I've got a comment here if people want to go check out the video and read my comment. But he's telling people to use Throttle Expo. He's saying it's overlooked. No one uses it. Everyone should use it. And I disagree. Do you want to tell the people what Throttle Expo is?
Sure. Yeah, the idea of throttle expo is that you basically set a midpoint on the throttle. So you find a place in the throttle, whether it's 50% or 40% or 30%, wherever your spot is. And then you build expo, which most people know expo from the other moves, but expo is basically adding in an exponential value so that you have more room around the spot that you pick, essentially. So like if I set my expo to 0.5, or my midpoint to 0.5, then I add expo, I'm going to increase the resolution around 0.5, but I'm going to lower the resolution at the top and the bottom. So when I come up on the throttle, it's going to come up faster, but then I'm going to hit this midpoint where I'm going to have this open area where it's a little, it's like higher resolution. There's plenty of room to move in there. I'm not changing a lot of thrust or throttle. And then suddenly I'm going to get to the top and I'm going to move a lot more throttle up to the top, depending on where you put that midpoint.
So you're giving up precision in one part of the stick travel to gain precision in another part of the stick travel. And so here are the reasons that here's the story of how I came to use linear throttle and eschew Throttle Expo. When I was first learning to fly, I struggled with altitude management, as many people do. I struggled with throttle control. And I used Throttle Expo to make it easier to hover and cruise. And I noticed that I was very bad at making sharp turns. And the reason for that is that when you go into a sharp turn, you have to be at a much higher throttle position than if you're just sort of cruising, because you bank over tightly. And as I was raising the throttle to go into that sharp turn, I was leaving the sort of soft spot of the throttle and entering the imprecise spot and making it very hard for me to turn. And I came to the conclusion, so that's number one. That's number one. Number two is that as a quadcopter's weight changes, the hover position, the cruise position changes. So if you set the Throttle Expo for one position, then it's going to be not correct when you sort of use a heavier battery or add or remove a GoPro. And then number three is that all of my different quads had a different hover position on the throttle, whether, a tiny whoop, a 5-inch, a beast class. And I found that it was just too much of a hassle to set up the Throttle Expo on every single one of them, especially when the midpoint would change as the weight changed. And so what I came to the conclusion was that the right thing to do was to just use a linear throttle and learn to find the throttle point and learn to control the throttle. And I that has worked for me. And when I see people saying you must use Throttle Expo, I feel like you're steering. This is sort of the ranty part. I feel like you're steering people down a path where you're not telling them the downsides. That's the thing. He's just saying, use Throttle Expo. It's amazing. And it's like, hold on. There are downsides here that people need to know about.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. I think it depends on what your goal is. A lot of people in chat are mentioning cinematic flight or cinematic quads. And I think for those, it can be much more important because you know where you're going to be the entire time. Like you're in level flight typically with the cinematic quad, or you know how you're going to be flying. I think it's very much easier to set Throttle Expo on something like that because you know like the range of it and you know the tilt, and you're not going to be that far tilted, or you're going to be at a certain tilt for the camera, and that's like a goal, right? So like if you're doing a shot to me, right, and you have a Cineloop and your best tilt is 15 degrees or whatever, like then you can set Throttle Expo and throttle mid for 15 degrees so that you have your hover point set and you have a nice resolution spot, because you're always going to be tilted about 15 degrees to get your shot. That's something in your head. That's a goal you're having. You're not doing acro and flips everywhere. But I think I get the idea that as you move more expo, and as you move farther away from doing just these level flight, always the same angle things, you're going to have situations where, oh, if I'm tilted really far down, or if I'm cutting a corner, or if I'm doing a flip, or if I'm doing this or that, the effect of that throttle expo is going to be different because I'm going to want the resolution in a different spot based on the place my quad is in. However, what I'll say is I think there is a decent point here, which is one thing he brings up, which we've looked at curves before, right? Motor response curves. And sometimes motor response curves have sort of like a big, like a whoop through them. They're not like a linear curve. So I think part of what his decision was is if you do a small amount of throttle expo and don't really worry about midpoint, maybe you could kind of fix that curve. Now, also, thrust linear, right? There's other things to try to fix this as well.
Yeah, so. Thrust linear has its own problems, but I think that there's two more things I'll say about this that actually kind of temper this a little bit. If you are concerned about being able to hover as a beginner, I would recommend that you use throttle scale and just make your quad less powerful. I do that with tiny whoops sometimes. If I'm flying a tiny whoop, especially if I'm flying in angle mode, like I'll seldom be above like 75 or 80% throttle, and I'll just take a throttle scale. I actually have it set up in my controller so I can just flip a switch and do it. And I'll take it down to 80% throttle, and then I'll just fly it, and it'll be easier to manage. But the counter argument to that is that I still want a soft hover position, but I still want full power if I need to do a big punch out. Throttle Expo does give you that. The other argument that, and I think this comment sums it up best, if I was going to support Throttle Expo, what I would say is use just enough expo that you barely even notice the curve. Like if you were to lop off the bottom and top 5% of the throttle, then I probably would never notice. Because like he says, no one cares about the difference between 97% throttle and 100% throttle. So if you're very gentle with the expo, you can stretch it and give yourself a little more control around the hover position. But I just remember my experience of trying to use it. Maybe I overdid it, and it made it unpredictable and hard to fly. And I didn't like it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So, yeah, you need precision. My argument is that you need precision throughout your throttle range. If you cruise at 45% throttle, you need precision there to maintain your cruise altitude. But if you're doing sharp slaloms, you may need precision at 75%. You can't just, unless, like you said, Blunty, you're doing very limited maneuvers, you can't just pick one throttle position and assume that that's where you need all your control. That's my take.
Also, like I still fly Forest batteries on 6S motors because I don't even care about the top end. Like I don't even care to find it. So like I just learn to fly around it and don't get into a situation where I can't save myself. And I find it's a lot of fun and I love the resolution. So
all right.
Yeah, just fly what you like.
Obviously fly what you like. And Chris Rosser is a smart man who gives good advice, but you can still disagree with people. And despite the fact that we called this a rant, there's no beef. So nobody worry about that. All righty. Let me get the super chats, Blunty. We got a couple super chats that have come in. I'm just going to read those real quick. Mike Speedy FPV, thanks for £5. Remy Tim, thanks for $2. Is buying DJI goggles a now or never thing? If you're super concerned about the root exploit, then maybe pick them up today before they start shipping it with the 015 firmware stock. But I would guess that you've got at least like 4 months at a minimum before you start seeing the 015 stock. I mean, how big is their pipeline? I don't know. If you're not concerned about the root exploit, then who cares? Just wait, just do it. It doesn't matter. Otis, thank you for a $10 super chat. Why haven't we been hearing much about new goggles? Seems like 8 months ago, everyone was releasing a goggle left and right. Now it's just Orca. Skyzone was killing it. I mean, Skyzone is still killing it. The Sky 04X is an excellent goggle. I think we have in some ways reached the sort of pinnacle of analog goggles, and there isn't as much of a point in making them better.
So I think it's going to be a cost thing. I think this is where we're going to run into who wants to pay $1,000 for goggles.
Right.
Because when you go up, there are better panels. Like Copen makes 4K panels. So you could go to a Copen 4K panel.
Why?
You could go
Why?
but
when your feed is 720p.
Yes, but I
At
know
best.
somebody the guy who sent me my goggles, actually, he's actually working on his own set of goggles. He's custom making them. He's doing all the 3D printing, but they're not cheap. He had to buy the panels, and then he's also trying to use an optical engine from a set of Sky Zones and stuff, and, like, building it based off that and stuff. So there's just a lot of work you have to do, and like you said, I think we're kind of at the pinnacle. Like, you have a great optical engine. Most people use that Chinese optical engine. I don't think Orca did, but I think most people do. And then most people are using the similar screen size and similar panel sources. And yeah, I don't know what we're going to see soon. So
Yeah. Yep. What we really need to see is more development in budget goggles in the $300 to $350 price range. That's where there's room for, but especially given how things are in the world today, I think that the prices are only going up and not down. And so, yeah.
So another great point by Dwayne. If I could get 4K feed with 4K goggles, I'd pay $1,000. So that's the other problem, is nobody's sending you a feed that's good enough to warrant much better panels too. So
yeah, yep. Sarge FPV, thanks for a $5 super chat. When do you think we'll see another HD0 receiver? That is very difficult to predict. HD0 is working on them, but like, for example, right now, some parts of China are shut down due to COVID. There was a delay in the Freestyle VTX due to COVID lockdowns. I don't think anybody could really predict a time frame at this point, but they are working on it, and they know you want them.
I'll just say as soon as possible, they will be out for sale. I can guarantee that.
Yeah.
So,
Virgin FPV, thanks for €2. Virgin FPV wants us to check out his throttle modification. I'm not interested right this second in just showing random stuff to the live stream. I appreciate your super chat. But I think I'm going to pass on that. Appreciate it. You can DM it to me and I'll look at it. But Ian Beatty, thank you for a $5 super chat. Thanks for getting the info out about the Espresso Zorro working with the XJT, since I heard a few local guys asking about doing that. Yeah, EdgeCX 2.7 will have that. Coelho FPV, thanks for $5. Good show. Thank you. Thank you, Coelho, for the donation. Bambi, thanks for £5. Sorry about your mom, Bandy. That was rough, but hope you're doing well. What about Throttle Expo, the Disney movie?
Oh,
Too deadpan. I missed it.
I didn't know if you knew something I didn't know. So there was
no Bambi, the deer in the Disney movie got shot by a hunter. It's too deadpan. It went right over everybody's head. What about Throttle Expo in racing when you generally need the most resolution at 90 to 100% throttle? Valid. I mean, if you spend the majority of your time at one throttle position, maybe Throttle Expo at that position will work. Like, for example, Blunty, 3S Freedom Spec Racing. Those guys are at 100% throttle all the time.
Yeah, but I'm going to say that's going to be, I don't know. I mean, it probably will help, but I bet it will get weird because of VBAT sag. Because you're sagging so much with racing that, like, I don't know how much benefit you'll get because you have so much sag and so much variance there. So
yeah,
it might be worth trying, though. I mean, if you're a racer, I definitely think you should run some packs with that.
Yeah,
I don't think
it's worth a try.
Idea.
Worth a try.
See how weird it feels. So
yeah. And then Squirrely, thanks for $2. I appreciate how honest and fair we are. Oh, well, I know there's definitely some manufacturers who think we're a little bit negative some of the time, but glad you think we're honest and fair.